The kitchen was silent, except for the faint hum of the walk-in fridge, its door ajar like an unspoken invitation I always refused. Thanksgiving Eve, and I stood alone, amid the gleam of stainless steel counters, pots already simmering with stocks that promised perfection tomorrow. My hands, scarred from years of precision, gripped the edge of the prep table. The ache in my chest wasn't from the heat, but from the ghosts of dinners past. Plates pushed away, words sharper than any knife. I'd built this sanctuary to escape them, to control every element. But tonight, as the clock edged toward midnight, a delivery loomed that could unravel it all. The heritage turkey from the local farm was due any minute, and with it, perhaps something I couldn't prepare for. I remember the first Thanksgiving I spent away from home like it was etched into my bones. I was 12, and the kitchen had been chaos. My mother's turkey dry as regret, my father's complaints slicing through the air like under-seasoned gravy. I'd hovered at the edges, stirring pots to avoid the tension, already sensing the fractures in our family. Food became my refuge even then, a way to impose order on the mess of laughter that felt forced, of arguments veiled as jokes. By high school, I'd taken over the meals, transforming our modest table into something almost elegant. But it never bridged the gap. They praised the food, sure, but the warmth stopped there, leaving me hungry for more than what was on the plate. At 22, everything shattered. I'd gathered the courage after months of silent rehearsals, sitting them down after a dinner I'd slaved over, roast chicken with herbs from the garden, potatoes creamy and perfect. "I'm gay," I said, the words tasting like ash despite the meal's success. My mother's fork paused midair, her face paling as if I'd poisoned the wine. My father didn't look up. He just pushed his plate away, the scrape echoing louder than any rejection. "This isn't our family," he muttered, and she nodded. Tears not for me, but for the image they'd lose. No yelling, no drama, just a quiet erasure. I left that night with a duffel bag and the recipe cards I'd collected, the only inheritance that felt real. Culinary school was my armor. I poured every ounce of that pain into knife work, into sauces that reduced to essence, into plating that demanded symmetry. By 28, I'd earned my first star at a bistro in the city. The Michelin Guide's nod, a validation sharper than any family approval. Control became my creed. In the kitchen, nothing betrayed me. I rose through the ranks, opening my own place, Evelyn's Table, 5 years ago. A sleek haven of modern American cuisine, where every reservation was a battle won. But Thanksgiving, that was sacred isolation. I'd close to the public but host an exclusive dinner for industry insiders, staffing it myself to dodge the holiday's pull. No turkey disasters, no awkward toasts, just work, pure and unyielding. Yet the longing simmered beneath, masked by the clatter of pans and barked orders. I'd catch myself watching couples in the dining room, their hands brushing over wine glasses, and feel that old ache twist deeper. Colleagues assumed my drive was ambition alone, but it was escape. From the parents who'd cut ties without a backward glance, from the fear that connection meant vulnerability. Dates fizzled. I chose women who understood the hours but not the hollows. Last year, alone after service, I'd stared at the empty alley through the kitchen window, wondering if this was all there'd be. Excellence without echo. This year felt different from the start. The menu hinged on a heritage turkey from Lena's farm, a supplier I'd vetted rigorously for her bird's flavor. Deep, earthy notes that no industrial bird could match. Her catalog promised authenticity, but reviews whispered of her unyielding standards, a mirror to my own. As I wiped down the counters that eve, the anticipation gnawed. The truck was late, and with service looming, precision demanded arrival now. Little did I know that delay carried more than foul. It brought the one force capable of cracking my facade. Morning broke with the sharp clang of metal on metal, my sous chef already barking orders at the line cooks as they diced onions into perfect, tearless cubes. The kitchen pulsed with controlled frenzy, steam rising from blanching pots like exhaled breaths held too long, the air thick with garlic and thyme, foundations for the 12-course tasting menu that would unfold tomorrow. Our guests were the elite, food critics from New York, a venture capitalist eyeing expansion, a few Michelin inspectors disguised as locals. Every plate had to whisper perfection, or my reputation would fracture like overcooked pastry. I moved through it all with the precision of a metronome, tasting reductions, adjusting flames, my white jacket a second skin that hid the tremor in my fingers. But beneath the rhythm, anxiety coiled tight. The heritage turkey hadn't arrived, and without it, the centerpiece, roasted with heritage apples and sage from Lena's own orchard, would collapse. I'd chosen her farm after months of samples, her birds arriving frozen in wax paper, their flesh marbled with fat, that promised succulence no factory could replicate. Lena's operation was small, sustainable, the kind of place that romanticized dirt under nails. But her emails had been crisp, professional, laced with a confidence that bordered on challenge. "This turkey will elevate your menu," she'd written. And I believed her, because in my world, elevation was everything. Yet, as the clock ticked past 9, the delivery window shattered, my mind racing through contingencies, a rushed substitute from the supplier in the city, flavors diluted, guests noticing the compromise. Vulnerability seeped in unbidden. This menu was my armor, each element a barrier against the holiday's pull. And now it teetered on her tardiness. What if the bird was subpar? What if her delay exposed the cracks in my control, mirroring the family I'd fled? The kitchen itself was my fortress, an imposing sanctuary of precision where angles were sharp and surfaces gleamed under halogen lights that cast no shadows. Marble counters stretched like judgment, sinks scrubbed to surgical cleanliness, the walk-in a vault of chilled order. I'd designed it this way. No clutter, no chaos, to counter the disorder of my past, where meals devolved into silences heavier than the food. Here, I ruled. Staff deferred to my nod, the hiss of the oven my command. But today, as I plated a test amuse-bouche, tiny quenelles of foie gras on brioche, the space felt constricting, the heat pressing against my skin like an unwelcome touch. I ruminated on the stakes. This dinner wasn't just business. It was defiance. A Thanksgiving reclaimed on my terms, free from parental judgment. Yet relying on an outsider like Lena introduced risk. A subtle surrender that stirred something deeper. An ache for authenticity I couldn't name. One that made my pulse quicken at the thought of her world intruding on mine. A low rumble cut through the din, tires crunching gravel in the alley. I glanced at the security monitor, heart stuttering as a battered pickup truck pulled up late, its bed laden with crates under a tarp speckled with frost. The door swung open, and there she was, Lena, stepping out with a practicality that rooted her to the earth. Her flannel shirt rolled to elbows, revealing forearms tanned and veined from labor. Beside her, a girl no older than 8 clambered down, clutching a thermos, her braids swinging like pendulums. The truck's engine ticked cooling, and I felt the shift immediately. The power dynamic tilting, me the gatekeeper of taste, her the provider of its raw heart. She wasn't just a supplier. She embodied the wildness I tamed. Her presence a quiet assertion that demanded respect, not deference. I wiped my hands on my apron, the fabric suddenly too starched, and headed to the back door. the anticipation humming between us before we'd even spoken. As the door creaked open, cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of hay and distant rain, a contrast to the kitchen's sterile warmth that made my skin prickle. Lena hoisted the heavy turkey crate with a grunt that resonated through the alley's chill, her boots scraping the concrete as she advanced, the weight settling into her shoulders like it belonged there. Wood smoke clung to her flannel, mingling with the faint tang of earth and frost, invading the kitchen's pristine air as she crossed the threshold. It was a scent that spoke of open fields and lingering fires, pulling at something primal in me I hadn't acknowledged in years. Behind her, the girl, Sophie, I learned later, trailed with wide, curious eyes that scanned the gleaming counters like they held secrets, her small hand tugging at Lena's jacket hem, offering an innocent warmth that sliced through the room's calculated coolness, making the space feel less like a fortress and more exposed. "I'm Lena," she said, setting the crate down with a thud that vibrated up my arms, her voice low and steady, carrying the cadence of someone who commanded without raising it. Up close, she was formidable, tall, with hips that curved solidly under worn jeans, the kind of build earned from wrangling livestock and tilling soil, not the measured steps of a tasting room. Her eyes, a deep hazel flecked with green like moss after rain, met mine without flinching, holding a gaze that stripped away the professional armor I'd worn all morning. In that steady look, I felt seen, not as the chef with stars on her name, but as the woman who'd been holding her breath too long. "Sorry for the delay, flat tire on the back road. But this bird's worth it. Heritage breed, pasture-raised, flavor that'll sing on your plate." I nodded, forcing my voice even, though the air between us hummed with an unspoken pull, her presence a disruption to the order I'd imposed. "Evelyn," I replied, extending a hand that she clasped firmly, her palm rough against my smoother one, calluses pressing like a map of labors I could only imagine. The contact lingered a beat too long, her grip warm and unyielding, sending a jolt through me that I masked by turning to the crate, its lid splintered from use, revealing the turkey nestled in straw, plump, its skin pale and unmarred, promising the depth we'd discussed in emails. Sophie peered in beside me, her braids brushing my arm, eyes lighting with a child's unfiltered awe. "Is it alive?" she asked, voice soft but piercing the tension, her warmth cutting through the chill like sunlight on frost. "No, sweetheart. It's ready for magic," Lena said, ruffling Sophie's hair with a tenderness that twisted something in my chest. Her hand moving with an ease that spoke of worlds beyond my controlled domain. I helped unload, our arms brushing as we lifted the crate toward the prep sink. Accidental at first, then not quite. Her forearm grazing mine, skin to skin through the thin barrier of my sleeve, sparking a heat that pooled low and insistent. Her back, visible as she bent to secure the bird, was smooth and strong under the flannel strain, muscles shifting like waves under taut canvas. I caught myself staring, the line of her spine a quiet invitation to trace what control couldn't contain. The space between us charged then, heavy with the unsaid, her competence a magnetism that drew me despite the stakes piling around us. We exchanged details briskly, trusting tips from her farm's traditions, my menu's needs, but laced through it was that undercurrent. Her low laugh at Sophie's chatter about the big chicken, easing the edges of my composure, cracking it just enough to let vulnerability seep. Sophie wandered to a stool, swinging her legs, her innocent gaze bouncing between us like a bridge over the chasm I'd built. As we carried the turkey to the prep area, Lena's hip bumped mine in the narrow pass, a fleeting pressure that lingered in my mind, her earthy scent wrapping around me like a promise of thaw. The kitchen, once my solitary realm, now pulsed with their intrusion, forcing a collaboration I hadn't anticipated, one that bound us closer than any contract. We maneuvered the crate through the narrow back hall, the turkey's weight pulling us into sync, our steps echoing off the tiled walls like a reluctant duet. Lena's shoulder brushed mine as we entered the main prep area, the contact brief but electric, her warmth seeping through the layers of fabric and resolve I'd wrapped around myself. The space was alive now with the morning's rhythm, knives flashing, pots bubbling, but it narrowed around us, forcing proximity in the island of counters where I'd planned to work alone. Sophie trailed, her small voice piping up about the giant bird's feathers, humanizing the sterile hum, turning the kitchen from my solitary command into something shared, almost domestic. "Need a hand with the trussing?" Lena asked, rolling up her sleeves further, revealing the full curve of her forearms, veined from seasons of harvest. Her offer hung in the air, practical yet laced with that steady confidence, as if she knew the bird's secrets better than any recipe. I hesitated, my fingers itching for the twine and needle, but nodded. Her expertise could save time, ensure the legs tucked just so for even roasting. We positioned the turkey on the board, its skin cool and smooth under my palms, a blank canvas waiting for precision. Lena stepped behind me, close enough that I felt the heat radiating from her body, her breath a faint rhythm against my neck as she demonstrated. "Like this, loop it firm but not tight, to let the heat circulate," she murmured, her hands guiding mine over the bird's contours, fingers overlapping in a tangle that sent a shiver up my spine. The touch was instructional at first, her calluses rough against my smoother skin. But it lingered, her palm pressing mine to secure the knot, the smooth expanse of the turkey's breast mirroring the unspoken glide between us. I focused on the task, yet my mind wandered to her form, her hips, competent and wide set under the denim, shifting with balanced grace as she adjusted her stance. They spoke of stability, of grounding that my high-wire life lacked. Her back, arched slightly as she reached for more twine, was a study in strength. Smooth lines visible through the flannel's gaps, muscles flexing like cords under silk. The sight pulled at me, an ache blooming low, the kind that blurred professional lines into something perilously personal. Sophie perched on a nearby stool, swinging her legs and chattering about farm cats that helped with mice but mostly napped, her words weaving through the tension like threads of light, easing the intensity without dispelling it. "Mommy says birds like stories while they cook," she added, her innocence a balm that made Lena's low chuckle vibrate through the air, close enough to feel it in my chest. We moved to basting next, the oven preheated to test the rub, her sage and apple infusion mixed with my brine, a collaboration born of necessity. Steam rose in clouds as I tilted the pan, Lena beside me, our arms brushing in the haze, eyes meeting over the vapor's curl. Hers held mine, unreadable yet intense, a hazel depth that mirrored the steam swirl, pulling me in until the world narrowed to that charged space between us. "You're a natural with this," I said, the compliment slipping out, veiled as admiration for her technique, though it encompassed more. The way her hands moved with purpose, the quiet authority that didn't demand but earned space. She smiled faintly, wiping her brow, the gesture drawing my gaze to the faint sheen on her skin. "Years of practice. The farm doesn't forgive mistakes." The words carried weight, hinting at lives shaped by elements beyond control. And in that moment, the kitchen's heat amplified the simmer between us, a slow burn that threatened to unsettle the order I'd clung to. As the test roast timer chimed, signaling a break for the staff meal, I caught myself glancing at the clock, dreading yet craving the hours ahead, the proximity that exposed layers I'd buried deep. The timer's chime released us from the oven's glow, and the staff filtered into the break room, a cramped nook off the kitchen where mismatched chairs circled a scarred wooden table, the air shifting from time-laced steam to the casual scent of reheated soup and fresh bread. I usually ate standing at the counter, a quick bite to sustain the grind, but today Lena's presence pulled me toward the group, Sophie skipping ahead to claim a seat with a crayon already in hand, her small form a beacon amid the line cook's easy banter. We settled with bowls of minestrone, my recipe, vegetables diced to uniform tenderness, and slices of sourdough that cracked under the knife. The informality a rare pause in the day's precision. Yet it amplified the hum between Lena and me, her knee brushing mine under the table as she shifted. A fleeting pressure that lingered, like an unfinished sentence. Sophie dove into her bowl with enthusiasm, slurping noodles that dangled from her spoon, her chatter filling the gaps as the staff nodded along, their fatigue softened by her energy. Lena watched her with a quiet intensity, her hazel eyes tracing the girl's movements. And in that gaze, I saw the outline of her life etched plain. The widowed mother on a sprawling farm, shoulders bearing more than crates of birds. "It's just us two most days," she said softly, when the conversation lulled, her voice threading through the clink of spoons, low and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder over fields. My wife, Clara, passed 3 years back. Complications from the cancer that came too fast. The farm was her dream first. She planted the orchards, taught me the rhythms of the soil. Now it's ours, Sophie and me, turning grief into something that grows. Her words carried no plea for sympathy, just the weight of truth, her hand resting on the table near mine, fingers splayed as if mapping the losses that shaped her steady hands. I swallowed against the knot in my throat, the soup's warmth doing little to ease the sudden exposure, and found myself sharing fragments I'd guarded like overproofed dough. Guarded, rising only under pressure. "My family's a ghost at these tables," I admitted, voice measured but cracking at the edges, eyes on the steam curling from my bowl. "Pushed me out at 22 for who I am. No second chances. Just silence that echoes louder every holiday. I cook through it now, turn Thanksgiving into work so I don't face the empty chairs." The staff murmured sympathies, but it was Lena's nod that anchored me, her expression unreadable yet empathetic, a bridge across our shared fractures. Sophie, sensing the shift, slid her paper across the table, a crayon sketch of the turkey, plump and cartoonish with exaggerated wings, hearts dotting the air around it like falling leaves. "For you, Chef Evelyn," she said, her warmth an emotional tether, pulling Lena's hand to ruffle her braids again, the gesture stirring an ache in me for the family I'd armored against. Silence fell between bites, charged and heavy, the space humming with unspoken longing as our eyes met across the table's clutter, her lips parting slightly on a breath that mirrored my own restrained pulse. The room's fluorescent buzz faded, narrowing to the curve of her neck where a faint pulse beat under sun-freckled skin, smooth and inviting in its quiet strength. Lena broke it first, her low voice evoking the harvest's labors with a cadence that painted vivid scenes, hands sinking into cool earth at dawn, the pull of roots giving way, sweat tracing paths down her back as the sun climbed, hips swaying with the side's arc through golden stalks. "There's a rhythm to it," she continued, leaning forward, the flannel straining across her shoulders. "A give and take with the land that demands you show up whole. No holding back." Her words wove through me, evocative and intimate, stirring visions of her form bent to the task, competent lines that promised more than soil's yield. In that admission, we circled to the core, our mutual isolation on holidays, her farm's quiet nights versus my kitchen's solitary glow, both veils over the same hollow. "I dread the silence out there," she confessed, fork pausing mid-air. Sophie asks about aunts and uncles who never call, and I wonder if we're enough. My response came unbidden, a mirror to her vulnerability. Work fills the quiet for me, but it's a cage of my own making. The connection deepened then, a tentative thread amid the staff's resuming chatter. But the evening service loomed, its chaos pulling us apart as timers beeped and orders flew. The break's intimacy fracturing under the kitchen's relentless pull. The break room's warmth faded as the kitchen reclaimed us, timers shrilling like alarms pulling me from a dream I hadn't wanted to wake from. Service erupted in a frenzy of clattering pans and urgent calls, the line cooks transforming from casual diners into a synchronized machine, flames leaping under sautés as orders piled up from the pass. Our guests arrived in waves, critics with discerning eyes, investors murmuring about expansions. The dining room, a distant hum of clinking crystal and low laughter that filtered back like pressure building in a sealed pot. I stationed myself at the center, directing the flow, but Lena lingered on the periphery, her offer to assist with final plating turning necessity into nearness. She wasn't staff, yet her presence wove through the chaos, a steady anchor amid the storm. We consulted in stolen bursts, her voice cutting through the din as we adjusted the turkey's slices, crisp skin yielding to tender meat infused with the sage we'd rubbed together hours before. "Looser fan here, to show the marbling," she suggested, leaning over the board, her arm pressing against mine in the tight space, the heat of her body a counterpoint to the cooling plates. The contact was practical, born of the rush, yet it ignited that familiar hum. Her hip grazing the counter's edge near my thigh, wide and assured in its curve, evoking the farm's unyielding strength. I nodded, plating with precision, but my focus splintered, drawn to the smooth line of her neck where a bead of sweat traced down, disappearing into the collar of her flannel. An invitation my mind lingered on, despite the timers ticking down. In the pantry's dim recess, away from the line's glare, we collided again, me reaching for extra jus, her stalking herbs from the shelf. My hand trembled from the pace, a rare slip, and hers closed over it, steadying the bottle with fingers warm and rough, calluses pressing into my skin like a secret shared in the shadows. The touch held, longer than needed, her thumb brushing my knuckle in a gesture that blurred instruction into intimacy, the space between us shrinking until her breath warmed my cheek. "You've got this," she murmured, hazel eyes locking on mine, intense and unblinking, stirring an ache that pooled deep, making the pantry's confines feel like a sanctuary laced with risk. I pulled away reluctantly, the absence of her grip leaving my hand chilled, but the memory burned, amplifying every glance across the kitchen. Guests' praise drifted back through the swing door. "This turkey, it's transcendent. Layers of earth and heritage you can't fake." Each word a shared triumph that bound us tighter, her lips curving in a private smile when our eyes met over the steam. It swelled the connection, her competence validating my vision, yet it twisted the longing sharper, her lingering proximity a constant pull amid the whirl. Sophie had curled up in my office earlier, napping on the worn couch with a blanket I'd draped over her small form, her peaceful breaths a symbol of budding warmth invading my solitary domain. Peeking in during a lull, I watched Lena check on her, tucking a stray braid behind the girl's ear with a tenderness that cracked my chest open, hinting at the family I'd denied myself. A jealous flicker sparked when she bantered with the sous chef over a sauce reduction, her laugh low and genuine, easing his tension with a story of farm mishaps that drew nods and grins from the team. She fit here too easily, her earthy ease bridging gaps I enforced with silence, stirring an envy not of her rapport, but of the lightness she carried without effort. As plates flew out and the pace peaked, the internal ache intensified. Every brush of her arm or shared nod fueling the simmer, her back arching gracefully as she reached for a tray, smooth and strong under the fabric's pull. a vision that haunted my periphery. The service dragged toward its end, exhaustion mingling with the unresolved tension, pulling us toward the quiet aftermath, where vulnerability waited, raw and inevitable. The final plate cleared at 11, the dining room emptying into the night like a sigh released, leaving the kitchen in a hush broken only by the drip of faucets and the faint slosh of pots soaking in the dim utility sink. Halogen lights dimmed to a soft glow, casting long shadows across the counters scarred from the day's battles, steam's residue lingering like exhaled secrets. Staff trickled out with weary nods, their aprons discarded in lockers. But Lena stayed, rolling up her sleeves to tackle the last of the cleanup, her offer quiet, insistent, as if leaving would sever the thread we'd woven through the frenzy. I watched her from the pass, exhaustion pulling at my limbs, yet the air between us thickened, charged with the unresolved simmer. Her presence a pull I no longer resisted. We worked in tandem, silent at first, the rhythm of scrubbing and stacking a language of its own. She reached for a high shelf, stacking clean trays with ease, her flannel riding up to reveal the smooth expanse of her back, taut skin over lean muscle, a faint sheen from the night's heat tracing the curve of her spine like an invitation etched in light. It held me captive, that line, strong yet yielding, the kind of form that spoke of mornings bent to the earth, unmarred by the precision I demanded of myself. My gaze lingered, tracing the dip where shoulder met waist, an ache stirring deep, warm and insistent, blurring the boundary between helper and something perilously more. As the last pot gleamed under the rinse, she turned, wiping her hands on a towel, her hips curving under the apron she'd borrowed, wide and assured, shifting with a grace that grounded the space. Denim-hugging contours earned from straddling fences and hauling feed. They drew my eye unbidden, competent lines that promised stability amid my chaos, a quiet power that made my pulse stutter. "You don't have to do this," I said, voice low in the emptying room. But she shook her head, hazel eyes meeting mine with that steady intensity, the kitchen's hush amplifying the hum between us. We sank onto stools at the prep island, the marble cool beneath my palms. A bottle of leftover Pinot passed between us in lieu of words. Conversation turned intimate then, halting at first, like a sauce thickening over low heat. Clara was my anchor, Lena confessed, swirling the wine, her voice a rumble that vibrated through the quiet. We built the farm hand in hand, but after she went, the night stretched empty. Sophie asleep, just me and the stars, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. Her fingers tightened on the glass, knuckles paling, and I saw the fractures there, mirrors to my own. The wine loosened my guard, words spilling like reduced stock. My heartbreaks stack like dirty plates, I admitted, the ache surfacing raw, eyes on the stem in my hand. Family first. They erased me for loving women, left me scrambling in a world that demanded I hide. Then lovers who saw the chef, not the woman hollowed by silence. I fear connection because it always demands surrender. And I've built everything on control. My voice cracked. Vulnerability a weight lifting yet terrifying. Her nod pulling more. Stories of dates that fizzled under my hours. The terror of letting someone see the girl who'd fled a holiday table for good. She reached across the island, tentative, her hand covering mine. Rough palm warm against my skin. Calluses a map of truths I'd only imagined. The touch escalated, slow and deliberate. Her thumb tracing my knuckle as I turned my palm up, fingers intertwining in a grip that sent heat spiraling low. I stood, drawn by the pull, closing the distance until her breath mingled with mine, the space charged electric. Our embrace followed, tentative at first, arms wrapping, her body solid against me. hips pressing in a curve that fit too perfectly, her back smooth under my hand as it slid there, tracing the line I'd admired. The kiss hovered, lips brushing in promise, longing a simmer boiling over, her scent of earth and wine enveloping me like sanctuary. But then my phone buzzed on the counter, shattering the hush. An insistent ring cutting through the intimacy, the screen lighting with a name I hadn't seen in years. Mom. The external world intruded, pulling us apart. The call a harbinger of pressures waiting to test what we'd just ignited. The phone's vibration echoed in the quiet kitchen, like a fault line cracking open, pulling me from Lena's warmth, her arms still loosely around me as I glanced at the screen. Mom's name glowing insistent, a ghost from the past I'd buried under layers of brine and reduction. I stepped back, the space between us suddenly vast, her hazel eyes searching mine with a question I couldn't answer yet. The ring persisted, and against the pull of her touch, I answered, voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Evelyn. My mother's tones sliced through, clipped and rehearsed, as if she'd practiced in the mirror. It's been too long. Your father's health is failing. He wants to see you for Thanksgiving. We all do. Come home. Put this behind us. The words landed like undercooked dough, heavy and unrisen, demanding reconciliation on their terms. No apology for the erasure. Just an expectation I'd fold. I gripped the counter, the marbles chill grounding me. Lena watching from the shadows, her presence a silent anchor amid the storm. It's not that simple, I replied, the ache flaring sharp, but she pressed on. Hints of family gatherings, the old table set with my recipes, as if food could mend what rejection had torn. I ended the call with a promise to think, the lie tasting bitter, my composure fracturing as tears pricked unbidden. The buzz didn't stop there. As dawn crept in, my phone lit with notifications, media alerts pinging like overzealous timers. Reviews of the dinner flooded in, praising the turkey's depth, the menu's innovation. But whispers of my intimate collaboration with the local supplier threaded through. A food blog speculating on the personal touch behind the heritage bird. Photos from guests capturing Lena's laugh in the dining room, our stolen glances immortalized. Exposure loomed, my guarded life risking the spotlight. Evelyn's table thrived on mystique, the lone genius chef, but this hinted at vulnerability, at bonds that could unravel the narrative I'd crafted. Investors emailed, curious about partnerships, but the subtext chilled. Any hint of personal drama could sway funding, turn a claim to scrutiny. Lena's hand found my shoulder then, thumb tracing a slow circle that sent warmth pooling despite the intrusion. Her touch a reminder of what the world might claim. Her own pressures surfaced as we cleaned the last of the counters, the dawn light filtering through the blinds in pale shafts. The farm's under fire, she admitted, voice low, hips leaning against the sink as she wiped her hands, the curve of her form a steady silhouette against the rising sun. Critics in the sustainable ag circuit, rival suppliers, even local regulators, questioned her methods, supply chain threats mounting with audits over water usage, whispers of boycotts if her unconventional operation didn't comply. Clara fought for this land. Now it's Sophie and me against the machine, she said, hazel eyes darkening, the weight pulling at her smooth back as she straightened, muscles shifting under flannel like a quiet rebellion. Our emerging bond complicated it. Her time here meant neglected chores, the pull between us a distraction from fences mending and orders shipping. The argument ignited over coffee, steam curling between us like unresolved tension, our knees brushing under the small table in the break room. We can't ignore this, I urged, the plea raw, my hand reaching for hers, fingers intertwining with a desperation that blurred lines. Your farm, my restaurant, they're us. But so is this. She pulled back slightly, conflict etching her face, the space humming with the ache of choices. Balancing it all? Careers demand everything. Adding us means risking it for both. Her voice cracked, hips shifting as she stood, the movement drawing my gaze to their assured sway. An internal war raging, wanting her near, fearing the cost. Sophie wandered in then, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her innocent question piercing the air. Why do grown-ups fight when they like each other? Mommy said love makes things easier, not harder. The words forced an emotional mirror, her small face reflecting our fractures, my composure fully breaking in a raw plea. Because we're scared, Sophie, of losing what we've built, of opening up only to be pushed away again. Tears spilled then, hot and unbidden. Lena's arms enveloping me once more, her back smooth and strong under my cheek as I clung, the stakes rising to a crisis of choice. Surrender to the bond or retreat to isolation's familiar cage. But as the sun climbed, demanding we face the day, the moment of stand approached, our intertwined hands a fragile vow against the gathering storm. The sun's climb demanded action, pulling us from the break room's charged hush into the morning's crisp light, where the alley waited like a stage for our reckoning. Lena's hand lingered in mine as we loaded the truck with empties, crates that had carried her birds into my world. Her fingers rough yet tender, a tether against the storm brewing in my chest. Sophie's question echoed, forcing the confrontation we'd skirted. Professional demands clashing with the personal pull. My restaurant's facade versus the farm's raw truth. We can't keep splitting ourselves, I said, voice raw from the night's confessions, turning to face her against the truck's weathered side, her hazel eyes steady amid the frost-kissed gravel. Your audits, my investors, they'll tear at us unless we stand together, not apart. She leaned in, hips pressing the door's edge, their curve a solid anchor that made my breath catch, the space between us humming with the ache of unspoken vows. Then we fight, she replied, low and resolute, her back arching slightly as she straightened, smooth lines flexing under flannel, like a promise of unyielding support. The words ignited the decisive clash, blending our worlds in a heated exchange, my fears of exposure spilling out, her worries for Sophie's stability mirroring mine, until frustration peaked in a tangle of arms, lips brushing in a fierce kiss that sealed our defiance, her body warm and yielding against me, erasing the divide. The farm delivery event that afternoon became our public stand, a local showcase for sustainable suppliers where critics and media gathered under tents strung with harvest lights, the air thick with cider's tang and wood smoke from braziers. I'd arrived unannounced, heart pounding as Lena presented her birds to the crowd, Sophie at her side, clutching a basket of apples, her braids tied with ribbons that caught the breeze. Whispers rippled, my presence noted, cameras flashing as I stepped to the mic beside her. The power dynamic shifting from supplier-chef to partners in vulnerability. This heritage turkey didn't just elevate my menu, I began, voice steady despite the tremor, my hand finding Lena's under the table, her palm warm and calloused against mine. It brought authenticity to a life I'd armored against connection, defying the family who rejected me for loving as I do. Gasps murmured through the crowd, but Sophie's small hand slipped into mine then, her innocent warmth sealing the family-like unity, eyes wide as she declared, Chef Evelyn makes the best food, and Mommy says sharing makes us stronger. The words cracked the air, my composure shattering publicly as tears welled, Lena's arm around my waist, her hip steady against mine. A quiet claim that amplified the embrace. Embracing our bond then felt like walls crumbling into sanctuary, the crowd's applause a balm against past rejections. Media capturing the moment, two women, hands linked, Sophie between us like a bridge to futures we dared not imagine. Investors approached later, not with scrutiny but support, praising the human story behind the cuisine. Lena's critics quieted, audits delayed by the spotlight on her sustainable heart. The emotional payoff washed over me in waves, the ache transforming from isolation to fullness, her steady gaze across the tent pulling me into a world where control yielded to connection. As dusk fell, we retreated to the farmhouse, Sophie chattering about the event, her drawing of us three, stick figures with hearts, pinned to the fridge like a vow. We shared a dawn meal the next morning. Actually, wait, no, that evening's quiet supper. But the light lingered golden. Plates of simple roast with her apples, our knees touching under the table. The sensory image of her hand tracing my arm, smooth and deliberate, turning the kitchen into home. The reflective close settled as Sophie dozed, Lena's low voice murmuring plans for next Thanksgiving, together, unhidden, transitioning us from crisis to a horizon where vulnerability bloomed. Our hands intertwined over steaming coffee as dawn broke, the ache finally easing into peace.
If this